Well, welcome to another Friday night. We've been looking at our nervous system, wanting to understand how it works, how trauma affects it, how it shapes how we respond and think and feel, depending on what state of our vagal system that we're in. And I hope it's been very helpful to you. So I want to today start looking at very practical tools for helping our nervous system. How do I, if I'm switched into my survival states, either my dorsal vagal or my sympathetic state, how do I get back to my ventral vagal state? That's really what it boils down to. That's really important stuff. And so I want to begin with just some very practical things that you can do in your own life that I hope will help you begin to be able to work with your nervous system in a way that is helping it to stay anchored in your ventral vagal state. So the first thing that I think is really important to do is map out what activates your stress system. What causes your stress system to increase to the point where you go out of your window of tolerance, you go up the ladder to your sympathetic state. So what are the things that cause that increase of stress? And this is really important for people from complex trauma because a lot of that has worked in their subconscious. They have lived in a stressful environment all the time. And so if you look at a gauge between 0 and 10, they lived in 7, 8, 9, 10 constantly. That was their normal. So now when they're in 3 or 4 or 5, they don't even think they're stressed. They don't even think it's growing. They're not even aware of it. And so what you're doing here is just developing a more conscious awareness of the early things that are causing your stress system to be activated. And so I want to look at 3 types of things that trigger your stress system. So number 1 is something, an event, a person, a place that triggers a strong, intense emotion. It's very sudden. So you see someone, you go somewhere, you smell something, you hear something, and you go from 0 to 100 in a nanosecond. And usually what it is because your brain processes bottom up through the brain stem, the limbic brain, before it even gets to your cortex, it's identified a memory of something that this resembles from the past that was dangerous, an old wound that hasn't healed, an unmet need from childhood that has never been met. And so you react. And often the reaction is way greater than the situation demands, but that's what your nervous system is back into survival mode. So this is intense, it's sudden, and it can vary in degrees of intensity, but it's very big. So just some common triggers of this. For many people, as soon as they're around seeing injustice, so they see a corrupt authority, they see a child or somebody getting bullied, they see very selfish people getting away with it, they are getting triggered. Or they see lying or cheating or self-righteous hypocrites. That just triggers them. Or disrespect is a huge one. So somebody patronizes them, speaks to them in a condescending way, makes them feel stupid, makes them feel not listened to, rolls their eyes at them, walks away while they're talking, does something that makes them look bad, or teases them with childhood names that hurt. Huge trigger. Or all of that is connected to shame. So anything that causes that deep shame belief that I'm not good enough to get triggered. So it could be an embarrassing event that happens. It could be somebody doesn't really hear you or try to understand you or get you. And shame triggered just causes a strong reaction within you that puts you back in survival mode. And then it could be just people that don't respect your boundaries, people that are insensitive to your needs. They're not attuned to your needs. Or anything that feels like rejection or abandonment or neglect, that people don't care, that people are basically saying you aren't good enough, you are nothing. anytime you start to feel overwhelmed. So all of those can trigger you going into this survival mode. I gotta go because now I am in big danger. So that's the first one. Second area of triggers is if you are experiencing a painful emotion like grief and you can't resolve it right away. Or let's say you have a job interview in 2 weeks, so you got some anxiety, but you can't just magically make that disappear. You got to get through the next 2 weeks. So you're living with an unpleasant emotion, a painful emotion for a period of time that there's not a quick way to resolve. You just have to tolerate it. You have to live with it. What many people find is that gradually takes its toll on them. It wears them down. It uses up all of their emotional fuel in their gas tank. And then one day they're just not able to cope anymore. And they switch to their survival system, to their sympathetic vagal state. And then the third one is if you are living with your 12 needs being met consistently, but all of a sudden there's one or two that you're not meeting, and you might not even be aware that you're not meeting, but deep down in your subconscious, there's a discontent starting to happen. There's a something's not right here beginning to happen. There's a discomfort starting to happen, and that you won't even notice for a while because it's quite small, it's quite quiet, but it's building, and gradually it will take its toll until that unmet need can no longer be ignored, and you just feel a deep discontent, a deep emptiness, a deep frustration, and you go to your sympathetic state. So all of those things can be massive triggers. Now I want to give you one other scenario that this to me is tricky but really, really important to understand. So I remember the days where I would go off to the office to work, and my job was very intense. My job was often working with people, but it was very much production performance oriented. I had to get a whole bunch of things done, a whole bunch of tasks done. I had to be focused. I had to go. And I could be in my ventrovagal state. I was very safe. I was very in a good place, but I was in that energy part of my ventrovagal state, performance part. Then I would come home and my wife and children all wanted to connect with me. That's also in my ventrovagal state, but it's a different part of my ventrovagal state than where I was at work. And so what I found was I am coming home from a very focused performance mode, and I have to switch into a connect mode. So I love the illustration that Brene Brown uses of the lock system in a canal. And so if you think of a lock system, you got two levels of water, a lake here at this level, a lake at this level. How do you get a boat from this lake to that lake? Well, you go through a lock system and you gradually lift them up to the level of that lake. And so they go into the lock and it fills with water, lifts them up, and then they go out. And that is how it works. So a couple of things for you to think about. If you come home from work and you've been in performance mode, very focused, very go, and all of a sudden your wife wants to connect and your children want to connect and your wife goes, "How was your day? Tell me all about it." That can trigger you. That's the last thing you want to talk about right now is your day. You want downtime. You need to be able to gradually go through the lock system to get from work mode to connect mode. And you can't just flip a switch and do that in a second. It takes some time. And what they have found with locks, especially with smaller boats, is that if you go into a lock and they start filling it up, and if they fill it too quickly with water, it creates too much turbulence and the boat can capsize. And so they have to fill it very gradually at a rate that the boat can tolerate. You can't speed up the process. And so the point I hope you see is when we are switching between roles during a day, we can be in our ventrovagal system in both, but we can be in different parts of our ventrovagal system. And to get from the one to the other, we have to go through a process where we allow ourselves to transition to the other. We can't flip a switch And it's different for every person. And you have to figure out, what is it that enables me to go from work mode to connect mode? How much time do I need? What do I need to do to get me into the right headspace? Now, the challenge becomes if you are coming home from work and your partner's coming home from work and you both need time, but you have children, you got to figure out how to take care of the needs of the kids as you transition. And so that might mean one might has to put kind of the lock system on hold for a bit and you take care of the children while your partner goes through the lock system and they transition. You got to figure those kind of things out. Talking about Brené Brown, one of the terms that she's used for this whole concept that we're talking about is below the line and above the line. So when you're above the line, you're in that ventral vagal state. You're in a good place. You're out of danger. But when you're below the line, you're in your survival state. You're feeling in danger. And so she'll often ask her staff, or she'll say to her staff, I'm feeling below the line today. And they automatically know that she's struggling to stay in her ventral vagal state or she's not in a good headspace. So that's just terminology that might be useful for you. So triggers, you got that figured out. What are your main triggers? And they're different for everybody. Secondly, what happens in my body? What happens inside of me as a whole person if I switch out of ventral vagal into my sympathetic or dorsal? Because there will be all kinds of switches that happen, changes that happen that we might not even be aware of. And so the next thing that I think is so important to do is become aware, map out your patterns of what happens in you when you switch. So for example, look at some of the changes in your body. And so your body changes often happen before you're even experiencing emotions or thoughts. They're often the first thing that you experience. So for many people, they feel or experience that their breathing increases and often gets a little more shallow when they're going into their survival states. Or they can feel their shoulders tighten, their jaw clench, they furrow their brows a little bit, so the muscles of their face tense up a little bit. Their hands tense a little bit. Their stomach, they can feel tighten a little bit. Sometimes they can feel themselves get a little bit warmer and their heart rate increases a little bit. Some people lean forward. So they're just in that more ready for action position. And then when they do move, it's like their movements become more rapid. So again, everybody's different. So look for what happens in your body when you're switching states. Second is notice what happens to your attention. And I think this one is huge. So your attention now is shifting from connecting and being attuned to people and present to scanning for problems, for looking around to see what's wrong. So you become more alert to your external, not to the connection person. Many people can feel themselves become less present. So all of a sudden somebody's talking to you, but you're not 100% focused on what they're saying. Or somebody comes into the room and wants to chat and you realize, I don't want to connect. I don't feel like chatting today. And so you're not listening as well. And then you might find that when they are talking, you just interrupt. You're not even wanting to explore. You just want this conversation over with. You want to argue. So you're in a different place when it comes to connecting. Some begin to realize that they start overthinking everything. Their brain speeds up and is now starting to play tapes. And when people are talking to them, they're more focused on how they're going to respond than actually listening to what people say. And then all of a sudden you just feel slightly rushed. It's like you're almost late for everything. You feel a time pressure. And so it's your nervous system now is getting mobilized for action. And so I don't have time to be present. I don't have time to be quiet and slow and listen. I got to get ready to go. So be aware of that. And then the early emotional stages. So many people, when they've switched, then they know they go to anger, they go to fear. Well, what are the early warning signs? So usually you find yourself just a little more irritable with people, a little more impatient. You get frustrated more easily. And then you can find that you feel misunderstood more easily. You feel disrespected more frequently. Like you're reading it in. You're just feeling that feeling. Like you're being judged. Like you're being pressured. You have this sense of more that I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed. I feel this urgency within me. I feel like I need to defend myself. So there's almost like this defensive posture that's taking place inside of you. I need to now explain everything, or I got to fix something. So early warning signs in your emotions is there's more of an edge. There's just not a buffer room for emotions. You just don't tolerate stuff. There's a shortness to you that wasn't there before. And then your voice and communication usually changes. And this is, to me, again, very important to begin to understand yourself and be aware of it. So we talked about prosody, the tone of your voice. So we talked about it in hearing other people, but when you now talk, it's going to change. So your voice is going to become sharper or flatter. So you're going to go to more of a monotonous voice or a more sharp voice, or you're going to talk faster or louder or more. Now you're going to interrupt a lot. You're not going to have curiosity. You're going to state stuff with certainty. This is the fact. And you're more defensive. And you have less empathy and less humor. And your conversations now are more like debates than they are like warm discussions. There's just an edge now to your voice. So be aware of that. And then be aware of how your thinking changes. So when you're in your ventrovagal state, there's a lot of flexibility in your thinking, an openness in your thinking. When you're going into survival state, your thinking gets more black and white. And so for some people, they can catch themselves. They're just starting to argue in their head, rehearse what they're going to say, build a case in their head, or they start blaming others or catastrophizing the worst case scenario stuff, or they start mind reading, predicting what others are going to say. They develop this certainty that they are right. They're dogmatic. And so they're less open to other perspectives. And then there's some behavioral warning signs that you're switching. And I think these are so important. So we talked about talking faster, but you might find that you start walking faster, or you just have to do something. So now you need to clean, and you clean a little more aggressively. You now need to multitask. You check your cell phone repeatedly. You work faster. You're checking your emails all the time, or you're just on your phone and you start doom scrolling. And then you develop you're a bit snippy. You're snapping at people, correcting people. You become a little bit more controlling, a little bit more perfectionistic. You don't tolerate error in others, stupidity in others. You become more productive. Everything's got to be productive, and you just can't sit still. So all of that is just starting to understand, how can I tell when my nervous system is switching to a survival state? So what are the triggers? What are the early warning signs? I hope that helps you. Next time we're going to look at, okay, now what do I do if I've switched to get it back to my ventrovagal state? So if this was helpful, please like, subscribe, share, make a comment. It really helps others to be made aware of this material. Thanks again. Goodbye.